Informatica first chapter. The agenda for this chapter is overview of Introduction to Informatica, overview of Informatica components, and what is the configuration and what database we provide you in the lab, and the basic start of Informatica. So, that is the agenda for today's class. Now we are going to talk about Informatica is the company name which was started way back in 1993. It is an Informatica Corporation in California. They started it. It was started by a person by name Mr. Dillon. Then the current CEO of Informatica is Sohail Abbasi, an ex-Oracle, is native of Pakistan, and basically Informatica is in the ETL space. Informatica is a company name. It has different products where they sell different products in the ETL space, in the reporting space, and in the metadata management, but they're not really made any impact in reporting space. We can say that they left that space, and now they are the world #1 leaders in the ETL space. Like Informatica, you have DataStage, you have Oracle Warehouse Builder, SSIS of Microsoft products. There are a lot of products in the market, but Informatica is the key leader in the space. So 34% world market share, Informatica. Most of the employees of Informatica are Oracle employees, ex-Oracle. You see a lot of flavor of Oracle in this. It's not a database, but the flavor of Oracle, the features, the processes of Oracle, you can feel it. If you have worked for a long time in Oracle, then after seeing Informatica for a couple of times, you will understand that they have that Oracle flavor in this tool. It is not a database. It is not a database. So this is a brief about Informatica as a company name. Now, before I go further down, a new person has joined this training program by name Mr. Yasim. Mr. Yasim, are you able to hear me? Can you send a message? Are you able to hear me?
Hello. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm able to hear. Okay, I'll put you on mute. If anything is there, just put me on the chat. Because
okay.
If it is unmute for all, disturbances will come into the when we are listening to the class. That's why we keep everybody on mute. So
okay.
If any is there, please send a message, then we can take it up from there.
Sure, thanks, Vijay.
No worries. Now, Informatica as a company name, different products it sells. So the productization of Informatica in the ETL space, they sell a product called Power Center. For reporting space, they sell a product called Power Analyzer. And for metadata management, I'm talking about the major products, they sell a product called Super Glue. And they have sub-products, quality products, data quality testing products, and they have very small products embedded in these products. But the major product is the Power Center. Basically, the version of Informatica which made the super duper hit in the world is 4.7 version, like Oracle 7.3.2, which became the super duper hit of the Oracle product. Like in Informatica, there was a product where I was trained. I got trained in 2000 in Informatica. PowerMart 4.7, and there were two products called PowerMart and Power Center 4.7 and 1.7. So this product made the major impact in the world market. Then they came up with PowerMart 5 and Power Center 5. Then PowerMart 6, version 6, and Power Center version 6. Then from 6, they discontinued the PowerMart. Then Power Center 7. The current version of Informatica is Power Center 8. In the design phase is 9 and 10. That's what the feature they're talking about. In this 9 and 10, they are going to talk about unstructured data. What is structured data means? Data in a format, data in a table, data in a view. All these are structured. Unstructured data means from an email, from a Word document, they will get the data out of that. That is what they call it as unstructured data, which they will go in full-fledged in version 9. Now that is the brief about the product of Informatica. Now let us come to the first step of Informatica learning, is the architecture of Informatica. Informatica by itself has two components. Informatica by itself has two components. That is server component, and whenever I call Informatica, it is nothing but the Power Center. So in this they have two products. One is client, another is two servers they have. In server software, they have two servers. One is called the Power Center, or let us call this they call this as a repository server or repository service. Informatica server or Informatica service. There are two components, two server products for Informatica, and in the client products there are four client products called Repository Manager, Designer, and Workflow Manager and Workflow Monitor. These are the four components of Informatica. These are called client products. Then they have two servers, and whenever you install this server, it needs a relational database where it will store its system tables. Informatica own tables. They have their own tables. So Informatica tables they are called. So they will store this Informatica tables, Informatica own tables. So for that they need a database, a relational database. We have to provide it. There they will install their system, their own tables. That is, when you install Informatica server, it will install these tables into one relational database, which they call it as repository. So these are the three pieces of Informatica product. When I say Informatica Power Center, ETL product. They have client components, client, and in server, two servers are there, and repository, which have the relational database. One thing please understand very carefully, do not look Informatica from data warehouse perspective. We discussed data warehouse concepts yesterday. Just park it aside. In this training program, first phase we will talk about just the Informatica tool. Then in the second set we will talk about this mini case study. In the third we will talk about advanced features. So you move away from data warehouse concepts, CD1 and all that stuff. Just to focus Informatica as a tool. Informatica as a tool, how it works. For first 5 to 7 days of the classes, you just focus how Informatica works. There is no data warehouse in this. There is no data warehouse in this. Nor data mart and all that stuff. Just Informatica is a tool, how it works. That's what is the agenda. How in data warehouse it will be used, we will take in the second phase of the training program. So, repository manager, designer, workflow manager, workflow monitor. These are the client tools, and these are the servers, and it needs a relational database called repository. So, when you install this, Informatica client components will be installed only on Windows environment. Server components, that is repository service and Informatica service, will be installed on Windows or Unix or Linux. Then Informatica repository, which is on a relational database. Repository can be on Oracle or Sybase or Informix or DB2. That is, it can install the system tables on any database, and that database can be installed on any environment, or in Windows environment or Unix environment or Linux, any environment of operating system. But client components should be installed on Informatica client. So they have web service also. They have separately for SAP BW service also. So this is called a service manager, which have different servers or services. The major servers are repository server and integration service. Sorry, here I should say integration service. Previous version we used to call Informatica server. From 8th version they said integration server. I'm sorry about this. Then administrator can manage the administrator console. To take the backups and all that stuff, he will use the administrator console. So in Informatica can extract data from any types of sources, can load data into any type of targets. They call it a source and a target. So Informatica can get data from any type of sources, can load data into any type of targets. It's a universal tool. It can extract data from mainframe, it can extract data from relational flat files, packaged application like Oracle apps, SAP systems, messaging systems like TIBCO, web methods. From those type of sources it can extract and load into those type of targets. And it will have a domain, which is a logical grouping of your integration service and repository services. You can have multiple integration service, multiple repository service when they install it. And you can have multiple repository databases also, as per the project requirement, as per the infrastructure requirement. Now, let us talk about what exactly Informatica tool works. In Informatica projects, when you work on, you have two roles. One is administrator, the other is administrator, the other is Informatica consultant. So you have these two roles. Administrator is responsible for installation, backup, and also he should be good in operating systems, because Informatica can be installed on any of the operating systems. You should have very good knowledge of operating systems, really good knowledge. And also relational database knowledge, not knowledge, he should be good in that, so that he can take the backup of the repository and all this stuff. Whereas Informatica consultant is a ETL developer. So this is ETL consultant is just developing the ETL programs. That is the role of an ETL consultant. So these are the two roles. This training is for the consultant role. We are not discussed much about administrator role in this training program. Now, Informatica as a tool has the client components and two server components.
So, why do you need a separate relational database if we have different databases like Oracle and all? Why do you need a separate database for Informatica alone?
Where, to answer your question, where it will store its system tables, its own tables. If you are familiar with Oracle, Oracle has its own system tables, where it will store the user ID, passwords, and all that of Oracle, or in any Sybase or any tool. They will store their, when you want to access Informatica, you need a user ID password. That information is stored in this repository.
Okay. So it's only authentication, or is there anything else?
More, which we will be discussing
now. Okay, sounds good. Right, thank you.
So, you have the repository services or a server, and you have a integration server or service. Then you have a relational database, which we call it as a repository, where Informatica own tables, which we call it as Informatica system tables, will be there in this. It has nothing to do with data warehouse project or anything like that. Its own table. So when you install Informatica, you need to give the repository. That is, if it is on Oracle, you have to give the Oracle information, user ID, password, and the connect information. So administrator, while installing, along with the product software, you will get the system tables that will get installed on this repository. Now you have the client components. Repository manager. First, whenever you want to access Informatica, you need a username and a password. So, as an administrator, he will create the username, passwords, privileges, who can access what authentication and all that stuff will be created by the administrator using repository manager client tool. Using repository manager client tool, he will enter the username, passwords, and privileges. But where that will be stored, the communication is to the repository service. The communication is to the repository service. It will communicate to the repository service. Internally, repository service will communicate to the repository of Informatica, where it will put its system tables. Where it will put that username, password, privileges in this system, Informatica system tables, which they call it as the repository. Now, as soon as you will want to log into Informatica, first you need a username, password, and the login can be done through client tools. These are your client tools. These both are your servers or services of Informatica. So the communication is between the repository and the Informatica client tools is through the repository server. Or from integration service server to repository, it is through the repository server. So repository service or server is the communicator between the client tools and the repository, integration service and repository. What is the use of integration service also we'll discuss in few minutes. Now, as a user of Informatica, if you want to use, you need to have a username password that will be created by using the client tool called Repository Manager. So, let me go and just show you what is the Repository Manager is. This is your client tool of Repository Manager. You enter username password. So you can create users, you can create groups, you can create privileges, who can watch, you can use what and read write privileges. All this can be created in Informatica by the administrator using the Repository Manager client tool. This is Repository Manager client tool. This is called a navigator window, analysis window, and output window. Look and feel will be the same. Now let us come to you have created a username password and it is there in your repository. Now as a ETL consultant, let us discuss something. Now what is the ETL process? That is nothing but you write in a traditional program like C, C++ or PLSQL, whatever you may write it. There, let's say it's PLSQL, you say select from EMP table, that is extraction. Then you say calculate sal plus commission, calculate total salary, sal plus commission. Then you say load the data. So this calculation is nothing but your transformation of data. Then what you do? You will ask to insert into some TGT table, which is load data. This is a traditional. I'm just writing an algorithm. You may write it in C, C++ or whatever it is. You write a program. This is your ETL process. The same thing, how you do it in Informatica is, in Informatica, there is a client tool called Designer. This is the work of ETL consultant. You will develop this ETL program in a GUI-based, simple, easy to build, which they call it as a mapping. Now, this is graphical user interface. So, to access the Designer tool, you need the username, password, and the privileges. So, when you enter the username, password into a Designer tool, it will go to this repository service and check your authentication of your username, password, and based on your privileges, you will have that on the tool. Now, using the Designer tool, you develop this ETL program in a graphical user interface. The program may look like this. This is your graphical interface. All icons will be there. So this is in this Designer tool, you develop the program in a graphical user interface. Less programming, logic is the same. Now, in a traditional programming, you have written the program. Then you have to check for errors. For that, you use compilation. That is, it will do only syntax errors. So when you create the mapping and you save the mapping will be saved in the repository of Informatica through the repository service. It will go and save it in the repository of Informatica. When it saves it, it will check for syntax errors. Invalid, even if it has errors, it will save it into the repository of Informatica through the repository service. Then in traditional programming, after you create it, then you say execute. You do the execution process in a traditional programming. You say execute, PLSQL program and all that stuff. For execution in Informatica, you do it everything through the client tool only. For execution in Informatica, there is a client tool called Workflow Manager. In this Workflow Manager, to execute that mapping, that is nothing but your programming. In Informatica language, it is mapping. In ab initio, they call it as a graph. So, like that, it is a mapping, a ETL program, a mapping. You want to execute a mapping in the Workflow Manager. For that, you will create a session. You associate the mapping which to be executed. You create a session. In this, there are set of instructions we will discuss as part of the training. And when you save it, this information is also going to store in the repository through the repository service. In the repository through the repository service. And then to execute the session in Informatica, for that session you need to create a workflow. These all things will be created in the Workflow Manager. Through the Workflow Manager client tool, you will be able to create all this. So, this is your Workflow Manager client tool, which I am going to show you now. So, in this, you create a session, all iconic. Then you use the Workflow Manager designer to create a workflow like this. Then you say right click and say start. That is nothing but execute. So you execute the workflow. Now all this information will be saved in the Informatica repository. Informatica repository. All this will be saved in the Informatica repository through the repository service. Then when you say execute, now the integration service is the server which will do the actual data processing, which will do the data processing. Till now you are only defining it, what the program should do and all that stuff. In the graphical user interface, syntax errors, everything is fine. Valid mapping only can be executed. No syntax error, then it is valid. Now this, when you say execute, this is all information is stored in Informatica repository. Now integration service will pick that information through the repository service only. There is no communication to the repository and integration service. So integration service will go to the repository service, take the repository information. Based on that, you said you extract the data from EMP table. So it will go to the database where that EMP table exists. And in this program you will write select from EMP. Extract means you have to select from EMP. So it will extract the data from that EMP table. Where did you write it? That program and everything in the ETL program. Where to write and how to write, I will tell you all that thing as part of the training program. So, but for you, understand that you have written a select statement, you have did a calculation, you set up insert into it, and in the Workflow Manager, you created a session set of instructions like commit interval and all that stuff. Then you create a workflow. Now you execute it. Till that, all this is stored in the repository of Informatica. Now integration service goes to that EMP table, extracts the complete data from that table, and puts it on this integration service machine where you have installed Informatica integration service hard disk. On that it will extract the data, complete data, 14 records or 14 million records, everything will be there. Then it will do row by row process, record by record process. One record at a time it will process it. So it will go and extract the data. Now it will go and insert the data. Physically this integration service is actual data processing. Then it will go to that TGT table and insert the data into this. Already you specified it, so integration service physically will go and insert the data into this. So while doing this process of integration service, extracting, transforming and loading the data, actual data processing, it will create a file called session log file. It will create a file called session log file. That will tell you each and every step what it is doing. Errors or no errors, it will create a log file. To access this log file and to know while the process is going on what is happening, to know all this, Informatica provides you with a client tool called Workflow Monitor. A client tool called Workflow Monitor. Through using that Workflow Monitor, you can access this session log file to see what happened. So while doing this process, you can monitor it also using a Workflow Monitor. So you develop a program in a Designer, graphical user interface program in a Designer client tool. Through that, it will go to the repository service and store it in the repository of Informatica. Then, if you want to execute it, then you have to create a session and you have to create a workflow for that. All that will be stored in the repository of Informatica. Communication is only through the repository service. Then when you say execute, internal mechanism, it will indicate to integration service that this program has to be executed. So integration service comes to the repository, takes the information of what to extract, what to transform, and all that stuff which you have written in a mapping, goes to the source, extracts the data, gets the data into the integration service machine. Row by row, it will process and load the data into the target table. This is how Informatica architecture works. So as a ETL consultant, you will be working on these three client tools. Are you with me? Please respond. Please send me a message. Yeah, tell me, Sim.
Yes, so Vijay, the integration service, is that the ETL server?
Yes.
Okay. And
this is the ETL server.
Okay, that's going to be the ETL server, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so the transformation, so all the metadata is that in the repository? All the transform, DML and everything is in the repository, right?
This is metadata.
Okay. And and one more question is, underneath what happens? So when you execute a transform, I know in ab initio what it does is it creates a console in the ETL server. So
here also it will do the file processing.
Okay.
Hello? That's the file processing. Same thing.
Okay, so underneath that it actually creates executable in the ETL server. Is that what you're saying?
Not executable. Multiple files will be created and it will do the process.
Okay.
We'll come there. When we do one example there, I will explain you how it will do. Subsequent classes.
Okay.
Now, yesterday we have discussed about metadata management. The metadata management is, this repository does not contain the actual data of EMP table nor target table, does not contain. It will contain user information, it contains mapping information, it contains scheduling. In workflow, you can schedule it, at what time it should execute all. This is called as metadata. This is called as metadata in Informatica. In general terminology, this is called metadata. So, this is the architecture layout of Informatica. So, when we come here, Informatica repository, I hope you are seeing this slide of Informatica architecture. So, Informatica as a client as a product, has two components, total three components. That is, it needs a repository. It has Informatica own tables in it. That is called metadata. Then Informatica has two servers, repository server and Informatica service or servers. That is, the Informatica repository server is the connectivity between the client tools and the repository, and integration service and the repository to be communicated is through the repository service only. So whenever you access it, Whenever you access it, it will go to this repository. Whenever you create a mapping, it will go and insert it. You do a modification to that mapping, it will go and update the mapping information in the repository, sessions and everything. If you modify it, it will modify it, it will update it, inserts it, and fetches you that information from there. That all management is done by the repository service. In the Informatica client tool, you have repository manager, designer, workflow manager, and workflow monitor client tools. So in the repository manager client tool, through that you will create the user's administration purpose. Using the designer tool, you will define the program, which they call it as a mapping. In the workflow manager, you will execute that mapping by creating a session and then the session assigning to a workflow. And using the workflow monitor, you monitor it. Using the workflow monitor, you monitor it. So this is about Informatica product. So this is your repository manager. Navigator window. This you will not be using as a ETL consultant, please. So in interview, people ask you, have you used repository manager? Say you haven't used it because just two years. Generally, Informatica administrator will be a 4 years of experience. Still, even if you have 4 years of experience, it is not mandatory that you have to be an administrator. So in interview, if somebody asks you, have you used administration? You can say no, because a lot of questions will come in administration like backup, patches applying, recovery, failure, operating system level interview questions will be there. Operating system questions will be there. So please don't say that you worked on administrator. If you haven't worked on administration, then you haven't worked on repository manager. That is a fundamental rule. So this is used for only for us as ETL consultants. We know that this is used to create users and passwords and privileges. Then the other tool which they are going to use, we call it as designer client tool, which will have same thing. Navigator window. This is your designer tool. How do I know? Here it is designer and this will be in green color. And you can navigate to other client tools by clicking on this button from version 8. Before version 8 it was not there. You have to log in separately to all the client tools, but now you can navigate to other tools, other client tools of Informatica. So this is your navigator window, workspace, and this is your output window. Then this is your workflow manager. How do I know? By reading this. This is workflow manager. So this is your navigator window and your workspace and the output window of it. Then when you execute it, just for a discussion sake, let me execute one workflow for you. Can you tell us which merchant came in which month? Oh. This version 8 came in September last year September. Before that, 2 years before that, 7 came in. And 2 years, every 2 years it will take to get a product out, average. But exact date I don't know. I'll try to find and get back to you. So when you execute this, you can monitor it. I will share that screen with you. This is your workflow monitor. So it is getting executed. And then get the log file. This is your log file. So it will tell you what it has done, the whole process it will write in the log file. So it extracted 14 and loaded 14 records in the target table. So this is your log file. You can see it in the task view also. This is task view and this is task view and Gantt chart. You can see it, what happened and all that stuff. This is called workflow monitor. So as per the discussion point, in the repository manager client, through the client tool, you will create the username, passwords and privileges. Designer, you will create the program. In the workflow manager, you will create the session and workflow. Then in workflow manager, you execute it. You monitor it when the execution is done. For our discussion sake, I will explain you once again. As an Informatica client tool, it contains two components, total three components. One is called the client components. In the client, you have what they call it as repository manager client tool. So these are your client tools. And you have a repository service. And you have an integration service. These are the two servers. Then Informatica has its own system tables, which they call it as a repository. While installing Informatica, it will install its system tables on this, which will have your repository of Informatica, which is nothing but a metadata. Now, using the client tool, repository manager, you create the users, password, privileges, and also they call it as folders, which we will discuss. So this will be created by the administrator using the client tool, and that information will be stored through the repository service, communicates to the repository. So it will store it in the repository of Informatica. Then using the designer tool, the actual ETL program will be written in a graphical user interface. That is, the ETL tool is designer. In the designer tool, you will create the program in a GUI, which they call it as a mapping. The terminology in Informatica they use is mapping. In ab initio, they call it as a graph. In project, in SSIS, I think, there are different programs. They call it as a program in a data stage, but here it is called as a info mapping. That is for develop that program which you have written in ETL, extraction transformation loading program, in a graphical user interface. You will write it, and that mapping, when you save it, it goes and saves in your Informatica repository through the repository service. And also it will check for, while doing the save, it will check for syntax errors. If there are any errors, it will tell you. If there are any syntax errors, then the mapping will become invalid. If no errors, then it will call as a valid mapping. All this will be stored in the repository through the repository service of Informatica. Then the next step they use is called as workflow manager client tool. Using this workflow manager to execute the mapping, for that you need to create a session and associate the mapping which you have created. How to do it, we will discuss as part of the training. Set of instructions like commit levels, log files where it should create, and all that you will set it up. When you save it, that will be saved in your repository. Then to execute the session, you need to create a workflow that is associated with single session or multiple sessions also you can associate, where you can schedule, you can execute multiple sessions. All this will be stored in Informatica repository. When you save it, it will be stored in the Informatica repository service. Then you say execute workflow. Then Informatica will, all this information which is stored in this, it will internally send the information to the integration service, which is your ETL server. So the communication is through the repository service only. Then based on your program, integration service will extract the data from the source. From source, it will go to the source and extracts the data based on your mapping. Based on your mapping, what you have written, it will go and get the data from the source, puts all the information onto the integration service, 14 records or 14 million records. Then it will transform the data by this integration service, row by row, single row at a time. ETL, you may call it as ETL engine or ETL server for your better understanding. So it will load data into the target table as per your mapping. All this is written in this repository to the mapping. So it will go and load the data into the target table of Informatica. It loads the data. Transformation happens in this. And while doing the whole process, Informatica will create a log file, which they call it as session log file. To monitor that session log file, you use a component called workflow monitor, which will have a Gantt chart or a task view to monitor what is happening and to access the log file. You can access the log file. This log file will be stored on the integration service machine. This log file will be stored on the integration service machine, not in the repository, please. For every time you execute, it will create a log file. It will be stored in a directory in the where you have installed the Informatica integration service, that is the ETL engine software where you have installed. On that, by default, it will be stored on the OS level. On the OS level, it will store that log file. You can access from Workflow Monitor, or you can access from the operating system level also. You can access the log file. So this is the architecture of Informatica. So basically, it will have two services, one repository and client tool. Every communication is between the repository service only. Any questions on this, please? I couldn't get you in interview. They test all these things. Means this server thing you're talking about, Venkat? No, they won't ask you this server questions, please. I am giving you this information because as an Informatica consultant, at least you should have the clear idea what is happening inside. But nobody will ask you how many repository tables are there, in which tables this information will be stored. That you will not be knowing it as an ETL consultant. Okay, Venkat? Are you with me, Venkat? Maybe you are writing some. Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Hey,
Okay.
yeah. So where does the repository lie?
In your database.
Oh,
Oracle database or Sybase database.
Oh, so it's not an Informatica specific database. It can be an Oracle,
It can be
Sybase, or
anything. It's not Informatica database. It will use any of the relational databases.
oh, okay. Okay.
This is the one. Informatica repository can be on Oracle, Sybase, Informix, or DB2. That Oracle can be on any Unix or any operating system. For that, so you will give this access to this while installing, so it will install the system levels. Clear?
Okay. So all the permissions and all actually it's going to the Oracle database, right? I mean, so when you create a user and all.
It will be stored in that Oracle database
Okay.
repository.
Okay. Okay.
So
And
this
what
repository is nothing but a relational database.
Okay, got it. Oh, yeah, I was not clear whether it was an Informatica specific database or a.
Okay, fine.
And one
Yeah.
more question. And what about if I need to access a mapping? Do I need to always view it through Informatica, or can I view it through the ETL server?
No, you have to use it from Informatica only, from the client tool designer only. You cannot view it at the operating system level.
Okay. Okay.
Okay? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Venkat, your question, Venkat. Did I answer your question, Venkat? Yeah. And all of you, do you have any questions about this architecture piece, where you fit in, what are these tools will be doing? power. So if you want to have more clarity, when we go further down, I'll tell you when we come to the data warehouse mini case study, please ask me there the question how the layout will be in a project, how they put all this Informatica, where they install and all that stuff. But for as of today, you think that this part is in Hyderabad, this whole thing. This repository is on a Oracle database for us. We created it on a Oracle database. This data repository and repository service, integration service is all in Hyderabad server, and this software is being installed on your machines. Now coming to Informatica, first step, whenever you want to access it, you will be given an ID by Sujay. The ID, has he given you IDs please? Okay. Yasim, you got the ID? You got the ID, Yasim?
I haven't.
Okay, fine. So, Sujay is not yet in. I will ask him to give you an ID. So, here in the worksheet, Rupali, Sita, you got the IDs, please? Rupali, you got the ID? Venkat got it. Biba got it. Okay. Yeah, that ID is your username. Yes. So open your worksheets which we have given you. On the first page itself, you enter your username and the password. Please write it down, your username. I'll share my screen with you. So in this first step, I think, Yasim, it will be yours, will be Stanza 05 SB14, I think. Venkat, this is the format, right? He has given it to you all. Stanza 0. For you, it might be 01 or 2. B14. Like this. Yeah. So, I think Stanza 05 is not there for any of you. So, Yasim, you use this ID, Stanza 05B14. Username or the ID which we provided. So, Stanza 05B14 is for you. Or I will ask him, what did he give? Stanza 01 to 3. For everybody he gave Stanza 01 to 3? Just an example. Okay, fine. Okay. If any change is there, Sujay will help you out for everybody. Now you enter in your worksheet that ID which we have provided. Now, in Informatica, when you work on Informatica, if you have observed it, you need to, your client tool should connect to the repository service. Any action has to be done, it has to connect to the repository service, and on which repository you are working. These repositories can be different. Development environment, one repository; test environment, one repository; production environment, one repository; project to project, different repositories will be created. So, you will be working on this repository. For this repository, there will be a name. They will give a name to this repository while installing it. And you have to access this repository service. You should know this repository. So when you go into projects also, you should ask them to give you the repository name. Please write it down in the sheet. Student is the repository name where you are going to access. Username is the name which we have provided you, that is given in tag X. You write the username which we provided you. Password is the same which we provided you. Username is the same, password is the same. Then domain name, please write it down and send a message when you are done. Then I will explain you. Domain name is domain_Sanza-global. Gateway host is Sanza-global. Gateway port is 6001. Folder, your name, which will be created by administrator. If you are done writing this, just send me a message. Then I will let you know what it is all about. Rupali, Sita, and Biba, are you done? Now I'll explain you what is this all about. This repository service and all this integration service, it is not case sensitive. The domain names are case sensitive. These are all case sensitive. This is capital letters. Username is in small letters. Yeah, you can call it as case sensitive. Answer to your question, Sita, yes. So this repository service and integration service, all this will be logically grouped in a domain. That grouping it will be done while installing it. So they give a name to it, which is called as a domain. Now that is what we have given the domain name. Administrator creates it while installing it. Then the next, this repository server is on which machine installed. On which machine the server software, repository server software is installed, on which machine. That is what they call it as host. So machine name you need to provide. And while installing this server components, Informatica by itself, by default, puts it in port number 6001 or 6002. In version 7, it was 5001 and 5002. In version 8, it is 6001, 6002. Like Oracle has 1521. Like that, default. So whenever you want to access it, you have to put the repository name, domain name, host name, port number, and the folder name. For every project, they will create a folder by the administrator. They will create workspace in which folder you are going to work. So if you observe this repository, they have created multiple folders in this so that you can use that folders. So in Informatica, for each project, each project, they will create each one a separate folder. Here in the lab, for lab facility, we created folders for you all. Each one will have its own folder. So when you go into the projects tomorrow, you should ask all this information. What is my username, password, what domain I should access. You should ask the ETL lead or the Informatica administrator to provide you this information. Now, let us assume you have a client tool like this. When you log in, you have to add a repository. That name is, already you might have added this username. So fresh, when you install in Designer, first you need to add a repository. Student is already there, so I gave student 1. So you add that repository and give the username, your username. Please write it down, student and the username. To add a repository, student and your ID, that is your username in your worksheet. So how to add repository and say add and give the username and password. Then double click. Then you have to connect. You have to provide connection information for this. So you enter your username, password. Same user, same password. If you don't have any domain, first you have to enter this domain name. For that you should say add. Domain underscore Stanza-global. Gateway host is Stanza underscore global or something like that. And then host port number is 6001. This is what is adding a. One time you add this, not every time. One time you add this information. So whenever you access it, whenever you are going to access this Informatica, please write it down this. Domain underscore Stanza-global. It may look a bit odd for you why to write all this, but our experience says if you write it, at least you remember it. And all of you, focus of this training program is on Informatica. So I want you to write all this so that you will be confident enough what is going on. You would have asked me a question, Vijay, you printed so much, why couldn't you print all this also? My answer to that question is, I do not want to give you a fish. I will teach you how to fish. I will try to share my knowledge of Informatica so that you can get a job. That's what is my goal. So you created the client. In that, to access every time it will be repository service. Every time it is repository service. Any access is repository. Internally it will go and connect to this repository. So you add it and you say OK, like this. Then you double click on this repository, username, password. Every time you don't need to give this information. One time you give it, then it will store it by itself. You can edit it also later if you want it. But you connect it. So then you will see this repository folders. These are called folders. Now let us come to the lab, which I want you to look at it. There are two databases we created in Oracle. One we called it as source, the other we called it as target. Here there is no dimension tables, no staging area and all that stuff, please. That will come in the next part of the training. So here, a vanilla flavor, basic concepts of Informatica: source, target, extract, transform and load. Extract, transform and load. For that purpose, we have two databases we created: source database and a target database. Two databases we have, and also we have sources called flat files, which we will be providing you as part of the training program. So to access these databases, please open your sheet and write this one. Source, target, both are on Oracle database only. So please write it down this in your sheet. And TGT underscore tag X means your username which we provided you. Please write it down this. Now let me show you the database. Student is your user, is the repository name, and username is the ID which I have given you. Stanza 05 or whatever that batch is, B14 or something like that. That will be your ID. Okay. Now let me show you the database. You can use Toad or SQL Loader, Developer, sorry. There are different tools. So source underscore student is the username password. So in this database, after the class, you have to access this database, please. So these are the tables which has data in it. And this is your source table like this. And to connect to another database, you can use this connection, and that is target. So you select star from tab. You will have the tables in this. So that is nothing but these tables, source and target for you. Now, let us look at it from a traditional programming. An example that you want to extract data from src underscore emp table, and you calculate total salary, salary plus commission, insert into some target table, tgt underscore emp. This is why how you write in a PLSQL, declare variables, begin, loop, end, and all. This is a process in a traditional PLSQL programming. Now, this is also ETL only. You have extracted the data, transformed the data, you loaded the data. Extracted from src underscore emp, calculated total salary, loaded the data into the target table. So this is your ETL specification, which we provided you, the ETL specification document. In projects also, they provide you like this, column to column the map and tell you what it is. So from src emp table, you need to load data into tgt emp table, and the logic is salary plus commission. Whenever you load data into total salary of this, it has to be salary plus commission. This is your Informatica. How to do it in Informatica? This is a document they have provided you. We also have provided you. So to do this, as we discussed, to develop any program, we have to use the designer tool. So I'm in the designer tool. For this, I will create a batch. For that, I create a folder in my administrator thing. This batch is S batch 14. The folder is created. I cannot access directly this. It is not refreshed directly. So I connect again. In the repository, I created the folder. Now this is your batch 14 of your repository of your. I will work under S batch 14. So now look at it. This is your mapping specification. How you do it in Informatica. Informatica design process is a 4-step process. Total 5. 4 is, first is you have to add repository. You have already added. Not every time you need to add it. First time you have to add the repository. You have added. Then the steps for Informatica is your ETL process. What is your ETL process? You need to extract the data. You need to extract data. From where you are going to extract data in Informatica terminology, they call it as the source. Where you want to load data. For transformation, you have transformation rules. Then to load data in Informatica, they call that as a target. The terminology they use is target. So, source, transformations, target is your ETL process. So how do they do in Informatica is, first you define the structure of your source. Then you define the structure of your target. Then you will create the whole program, which they call it as a mapping. First you define the source, define the target, then you create the mapping. For that, in the designer tool, it has 5 components: source analyzer, target designer, transformation developer, maplet designer, and a mapping designer. There are 5 components. Regarding transformation developer and maplet, we will discuss later. That is for reusable components. So whenever you want to define anything as a source structure, then you use the component called source analyzer. This is your source analyzer. So there are source or source analyzer, target or target designer, transformation or transformation developer, maplet or maplet designer, mapping or mapping designer. Cubes, dimensions and business components will not be used in your ATL role. They are there from version 4.7, but we don't use it. We only use these 5 components. Now, whenever you want to define anything as a source, you have to use source analyzer, these buttons. If you click on this, this is source analyzer. Whatever you define, your workspace, this is, whatever you define it, that will become your source. This is your target designer, or where whatever you define under this, that will become your target. Transformation developer, maplet designer is for your reusable components. Then you have mapping design. In this mapping designer, you will define your mapping. You will define your mapping. So source, target, mapping designer. Please observe the toolbar. Source, different toolbar. Target, different toolbar. Mapping designer, different toolbar. If you are not able to see these when you log in, it can be accessed from here also. Source analyzer, target designer, mapping designer. So there are 5 components. 2 are for reusable. One is for defining the source. You use source analyzer. To define the target, you use target designer. In the mapping, you will create the mapping. So first step, you have to create the source. Okay, please wait. After the class is over, we will help you out. We will help you out after the class. So, the source analyzer, you will define the source structure. So, when you define the source structure, how to define a source structure? You can import it from a database, you can import it from a file, you can import it from a COBOL file, you can import it from a XML file. So in Informatica, you can do this. You can import it from a XML file, or you can import it from a... Please hold on for a minute. So in a source analyzer, you define the source structure. The source can be a table or a file or a COBOL file. But to define the structure, you will use a repository. In source analyzer, you define it. Where the definition will be stored? In the repository through the repository service. So source analyzer is used only to define the source structure. So as per your sheet, we have given this. I will define the structure in the source analyzer. How to define it? Sources, create. Source analyzer, sources, create. The name of the table, don't forget it as it is. Please write it down as per your specification document which we provided you in page number 8. This is your source document. So as per that, you create it. What is the database? That is called as Oracle. So create it under Oracle, the structure, and database type is Oracle. So don't forget it to use this. So Oracle src_emp is the table. Structure, only structure, not the data. I'm defining the table. Please observe it. Double click, columns, add. In this emp number, integer, you will have multiple types of columns, data types. For me, it is a number, ename, varchar 250, sal, number PS, commission, number PS, and department number. How do I know I have given this? So, EMP number, ename, sal, commission, and the department number is your source. You say OK. Now you save it. Repository, save. Please observe here in this area, repository, save. So under that repository, for that folder student, under repository student folder is batch 14. For that source Oracle SRC EMP has been inserted. This is your source structure. This is your source structure. I will define the source again. Source, create, give a name. I'll give a name as SRC underscore EMP1. Give the database name Oracle, database type Oracle, create, and double click on it. Under columns, add EMP number is a number, add key name, sal, number PS, and the department number. This is how you create the structure only, then you save it. This is creating the structure of your source in the designer tool. Then in the target designer, I want to load data into a target, that is TGT underscore EMP table. TGT underscore EMP table. Target, create. The table is TGT underscore. Where it is I am creating? In the target designer tool. Target, create, TGT underscore EMP table. Database type Oracle, create. Double click, columns, add. So the table structure of this is employee number, e-name, department number, and total salary. So employee number is a number, e-name, department number, and total salary. And save your work. With this, I am done for today. Anybody has any questions? Do you have any questions, please? That we will discuss separately. No, in this, no, it isn't. It will not be same, Venkat. No, this is a different target table in this example. This is an example. It will be different. It won't be same. Generally, it won't be same. Now, నువ్వు డెల్ ఓపెన్ చేసుకున్నావా? That we will discuss Sita separately. No, we can use that DML also, but we have physically created the table there itself, Yasin. Answer to Sita's question, when source is a file, we will cover it in the third class. Yeah, here we are only defining the structure, Yasin. It's just we are defining it. We'll go step by step. Yeah. Insert into the table. Actually, we lost power here. And as soon, please you wait for half an hour, 40 minutes. As soon as the power comes, Sujay will send you another email. Okay. I cannot do anything on this because we don't have the backup of this. Uh, let me take it tomorrow morning, Sita, tomorrow evening in your class. First thing we will discuss again the domain name and host one more time. Definitely we will discuss tomorrow.